over the weekend, I spoke to Ime Udoka on the phone for about 20 minutes about this specific subject. And we talked about the resistance that he faced from these Celtics players early on to two specific things that he was trying to implement. Defensively, they play very differently from how they played under Brad Stevens. The way this team switches, only a handful of teams in the NBA do it, largely because if you don't have a point guard that can switch in the way that Marcus Smart can switch, there's no point in doing it. And the Celtics, for the last 10 years, they have often or always really had a lead guard who has been a defensive liability, whether it was Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker. You had to hide that player. So the Celtics, they were transforming their defense in training camp to become something totally different, to the point where Ime told me that Jayson Tatum came to him in the first week of training camp and saying, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe we should go back to some of the principles that we used in previous seasons. Ime's message, just stick with it and force them to stick with it. The other part on the other end of the ball was that, Ime, he had a bird's eye view of these Celtics for the last 2 years. He was an assistant on Brett Brown's staff when they lost to Boston in the bubble. He was an assistant on Steve Nash's staff when they beat them in the first round. He knew what this team needed. And what this team needed was for Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown to stop being so focused on being one-on-one players and become playmakers, to embrace that part of the offensive game. It was funny, Colin, you go back even further to when Ime was introduced as the Celtics head coach. He's sitting up there next to Brad Stevens, and somebody asks him about improvements. And Ime specifically cites that the Celtics were 27th in assists in that previous season. Looks over at Brad kind of sheepishly and is like, sorry, Brad. Sorry, I had to say it, but we need to improve in that area. So he knew what this team needed to do to get better. It just took them months to figure it out and to really embrace it. They weren't truly bought in probably until after the first of the year. There were flickers towards the end. You remember that Phoenix game on New Year's Eve where they just blew the doors off the Suns? They were moving the ball really well there. But it wasn't until mid to late January where it all started to coalesce and they completely bought in. So that's basically what it boils down to. They just weren't embracing what Ime wanted them to do in those first 2 months of the season.
My belief is it's always easier to get football players to buy in than basketball players because you can cut them. And basketball players have dual incomes. They have shoe incomes. Now they have social incomes. And it is a players' league. It has been since the 70s. And so it is harder to move guys a little bit in your direction until they start losing or being embarrassed. Where in the NFL, you just get cut. Like, you're going to do it. It's the shield. It's the coach. It's the GM. So I think that's my belief is Ime, he's smart. He knows what he's doing. He's a forceful presence. But I think it is harder sometimes. Eric Spoelstra, they were winning games, and LeBron wasn't happy. And, it's harder when guys are established and they're stars. And I know Spoelstra. You know him probably better than I do. But it's not that they don't think he's intellectually capable or basketball savvy. It's hard to move basketball stars off positions. And I think, and Boston's guys weren't superstars, but they'd had real success. They'd had 3 Eastern Conference Finals. I felt before the series, and this is probably naive.
Let me just add one other thing, Colin, on Ime. One thing he did that surprised me that worked was his tough love paid off. I mean, I do TV in Boston as well for NBC Sports, and I do the pre- and post-game show. And I can't tell you the number of times I sat on that desk after bad losses, watching an Ime press conference and then responding to it after he had just taken out the blowtorch and napalm these guys. Like, he was hitting them hard. He wasn't, Brad Stevens, his philosophy, as it is with many coaches in the NBA, was to take it all on him. It was the coach's fault. I made all the mistakes. It's not the players, because he believed that was in the best interest of the team. Ime didn't do that. Ime just went out there and specifically cited guys who weren't getting the job done. I remember thinking, this is never going to work. Like, a coach with no resume to speak of, a first-year head coach on any level, blasting his team in the way Ime is never going to work. But it turns out that's exactly the kind of coaching that these Celtics craved and exactly the kind of coaching that they ultimately responded to. So it was, and look, a quick example, Robert Williams is playing in this series right now because Ime Udoka spent the first 2 months of the year and even before that, into training camp, finding 900 ways to call Robert Williams soft, to basically imply that Robert Williams in years past did not play through pain as much as he should have. Fast forward through this season, there's a toughness to Robert Williams that simply did not exist in previous years. And that's what's enabling him to go out there on one leg, coming back a month after knee surgery, and give them 20, 25 good minutes every single night. That's a direct result of the tough love Ime Udoka showed him.
There was a point, and again, it's been a players' league forever, but there was a point where a few years ago, and some of this, it sounds crazy, but Donald Trump had everybody on edge in this country, and it was very polarizing, and the NBA players, I thought rightly so, took a real stand. Like, this shit ain't going to fly. You're with him, you're not with us. And not that the NBA had coaches that were Republican or conservative or pro-Trump, but the players were empowered, and they felt strongly about a social situation in our country. And I think a lot of coaches in that process put their arms around those players and doubled down on their empowerment. I thought it was the right thing to do, but that can be difficult for 24, 25, 26-year-old players. Then you have to pivot back to, okay, I'm going to hard coach your ass the next year. And maybe I'm just reaching here, but it's always been a players' league. But I did feel there was a time when the players really were the league needed the coaches, the GMs, the commissioner. No. We're not going to have a president criticizing our players, period. Then the pandemic, the bubble. And then you got to pivot back to that. And it really works. Steve Kerr can coach hard. Ime coaches hard. Pop coaches hard. Spoelstra coaches hard. I do think players want to be coached hard. I really do, Chris. In my years of it, Phil Jackson could be brutal. Could be, so I guess my long-winded point was hard coaching works at every level. It's a little harder. Baseball, long contracts, basketball, guaranteed contracts, but it works. I think in your years of covering the Celtics, I think what happened to Brad Stevens is he smartly realized they were tuning him out. He had a player or two that didn't connect with him, and he realized this is not the time. That was my takeaway. Is he's a smart enough guy, got self-awareness. He's like, you know what? I think Quinn Snyder feels the same way. Like, I'm just running in circles here. I can't figure out the Gobert-Donovan Mitchell issue. I can't solve this jigsaw puzzle. Let's get a former player in here. So I'm vomiting here, but your thought on that?
No, I think when it comes to hard coaching, you have to read the room, right? Brad Stevens, for his entire time in Boston, I viewed him as a top 10 coach. At times, I felt he was a top 5 coach in the NBA. His play calling, his understanding of basketball is at an elite level. But as he got towards the end, it certainly, I don't know if his voice was being drowned out or tuned out, but it wasn't having the same impact. The players were not responding in the way they responded early in the careers of Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart. And to Brad Stevens' credit, he didn't go out there and find someone that he could connect with or relate with on a personal level. He went out there and found the anti-Brad Stevens. He found a coach who was philosophically and in terms of coaching background, completely different. Ime Udoka, ex-player, never been a head coach on any level, longtime assistant, defensive-minded guy as he was in his previous 2 stops in Brooklyn and in Philadelphia. He found a guy that could give this team something that he couldn't. That's one of the biggest reasons the Celtics are here right now. And I agree with you on Quinn Snyder. I think it's the exact same type of situation. I don't know if a new coach is going to be able to come in and elevate that team to a Celtics-like level. There are just too many flaws with that roster, beginning on the defensive side. But I do think they would respond better to a different coach than Quinn Snyder.